Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Gradcentric podcast. Today, we're going to talk about blanket loan forgiveness. By the way, if you're new to this podcast, really the format is that we talk about college and student loan planning topics, but we do so in a pretty abbreviated fashion. This isn't going to be an hour-long podcast. I want to get relevant information to you in a way that is short and sweet and that you can listen to on your way to work and get that information and get along with your day. So blanket loan forgiveness, what is it? So there's this idea that especially the president in particular could potentially by executive order or some other action, blanket forgive student loan debt by executive order. And there's been a lot of talk about this since the Biden administration came into existence or took over power in the executive branch here in the United States as to whether the Biden administration would do this. Now, I would say there's been a lot of movement in this space, particularly in the last couple of weeks. So if you would have asked me a year ago whether I thought blanket loan forgiveness would happen, I would say, yeah, it's possible. But maybe even not likely. There were lots of other programs that we were seeing, like the public service loan forgiveness waiver or suspension of interest and payments that were really helpful to borrowers, but weren't necessarily as politically risky as blanket loan forgiveness. Because blanket loan forgiveness, there are a lot of people out there that would say, well, hey, I paid my loans down. Where does that leave me? Or maybe I paid for cash out of pocket or from savings from a 529 account. So there's a lot of people out there that don't approve of blanket loan forgiveness. And it's also expensive too, right? And I won't give specific numbers on this podcast, but you can do research if you'd like, and you can see what each level of loan forgiveness would cost, and it's not cheap. So where does this leave us? Well, I would say, of course, again, a year ago, I would maybe say that this isn't likely, but actually there's been a lot of movement in the last couple of weeks as to whether we might see blanket loan forgiveness for federal student loans. And keep that in mind too, when we talk about what the government can do in terms of student loans, a lot of times we're talking about what they can do with their own debt portfolio, right? This idea of federal student loans versus private student loans, which I've talked about in workshops and in episodes before. We do have loans that originated in the private market. We have loans that are originated by the government, federal student loans, or backed by the government or tied to the government in some way. Now, the way that federal student loans have been issued has changed over time. But we're talking about federal versus private student loans. And in this case, we're really talking about federal student loans and what the government can do in terms of blanket loan forgiveness. So where does this leave us? Again, getting back to this idea of blanket loan forgiveness. Well, I don't think that President Biden is going to blanket loan forgive a large amount, like let's say 50,000. Actually, he said that in a town hall. And that's something that we can feel fairly sure about, that it's not going to be a significant. Well, I shouldn't say significant. It likely blanket loan forgiveness would be significant, but it likely won't be at those higher levels. But there certainly is a lot of pressure and has been for quite a while for the Biden administration to give some type of blanket loan forgiveness. This was also a campaign promise. So there's been Senator Elizabeth Warren's hearing on student loan debt. There have been organizations and letters sent, organizations pressuring and letters sent to the administration to blanket loan forgive some student loans. And again, over the last couple of weeks, we've seen a lot of movement. So there's been lots of news articles recently about potential loan forgiveness, and the administration is looking into this idea after tackling some of these other programs like the waiver program for public service loan forgiveness or the extension of no payments, no interest on student loans. So where does this leave us? Well, I think that student loan forgiveness will, if it is blanket loan forgiveness, will likely be more limited and lower in scope, potentially, let's say maybe $10,000 for undergraduate borrowers or some type of income test. So I don't think really anybody knows. Nobody has a crystal ball as to what it might look like for the Biden administration to do blanket loan forgiveness. But what's exciting is that this may happen sooner rather than later. I would expect to maybe hear or get an update about this in the next couple weeks or the next month. And so let's keep our ear to the ground, and hopefully we'll get an update from the Biden administration soon on blanket loan forgiveness. But this is kind of my take on it, and hopefully it's been helpful for you.